Hi everyone, I am finally back with a highly requested video. We are going to be going over something that could seem really basic but tends to be a little challenging sometimes, especially if you're a beginner. We're going to go over how to do an acrylic full set, and I'm going to try to be a little detailed again because this is a highly requested video. If you guys want to know what acrylic I'm using the Beauty Pure in the color the perfect nude. 95% of my sets I always use this acrylic, and then my monomer I get from a store called Cosmoprof. I'm not sure if they're everywhere in the world, but I do know that store is pretty popular. The only thing about that is that you do have to have a license to shop there, but that's not even a big deal because you can really get your monomer anywhere as long as it's a good quality monomer. It doesn't have to be bought from a licensed store. And then also to another popular question that I get is what size brush I'm using. I am using a size 8 brush, which also might surprise a few people. A lot of people think you need to use a really big brush, but I have started using a size 8 brush from the very beginning, and that was like 6 years ago, and I still use a size 8 brush to this day. It just makes things a little bit more easier for me. It's easier to clean up and easier to control the acrylic. But also, before I move forward, this is a part 1 video. I also want to show you guys how I did this really cute trendy animal print, so stay tuned for that. And I hope to get that out this week as well. So first thing I want to go over is the position of the nail and really the hand when you're doing an acrylic set. Super important. You have to have the finger, not even really just the hand, but most importantly the finger, pointed towards the table, because you want to work with gravity. Sometimes I know it may be tough because your client may want to see what you're doing, so they will tend to hold their hand up, which will cause the acrylic to float back towards the cuticle, and obviously that is not what we want because you want to keep the cuticle as clean as possible because that will also make sure that you don't have any lifting. So that's the number one, I think the most important step is you want to work with gravity. You want your nail and your hand if you can, but you want the hand to be pointed towards the table. I think that's super important. Also too, another thing that can help you is just practicing your liquid to powder ratio. It may take a couple times to figure out what your ratio is. Sometimes people like to work with a really liquid bead, and sometimes people prefer to work with a drier bead. I like to go with something somewhat in the middle, because I just think it's easier to work with. I don't like to move really dry beads. I think it just stresses me out, and I don't really like to use really liquidy beads because I think it's just harder to control. So make sure you are practicing your liquid to powder ratio. I also tell my students and my clients, or just my students who are interested in doing the nails when we do our one-on-ones, is to just create beads of all sizes. Like, you don't have to even have a client for this or a model for this. Just pick up some acrylic and place it on a paper towel just to work on your bead size. And I honestly think those are like two really important things when it comes to doing an acrylic set. I also try to remember to tell people that it is okay if you don't lay your acrylic as smooth as possible, because that's what shaping is for, and filing, which is great because you don't have to be super perfect. The file and the e-file will do wonders. I actually prefer to make my acrylic perfect with a hand file, because it's just, again, more control. And I think that's really what an acrylic set is all about, is you want to take control. You want to be able to control the product. You want to be able to control the filing, the buffing, and how smooth you want the nail to be. And I think that if you keep those things in mind, it will get a little bit easier. And also too, I think acrylic is one of those things where the more you do it, the better you get. I always say that to people, because it's just, you have to get comfortable with how much powder you want to pick up, and that also comes back into play with the smaller brushes. You know, you don't have to do a super big brush because it'll be harder to control, and it's just a lot more cleanup on the back end. I mean, if you prefer it, then it works for you, then that's great. But I'm just letting it be known that you don't have to work with a big brush. I always say a size 8 and maybe even a 10 if you want. But yeah, I would say try out different sizes and see which one works best for you. In this clip here, I am doing some fouling. I didn't go into detail with this video, with this part though. If you guys want a more in-depth video on how to smooth and shape and buff, then I definitely will give you guys a video for that. After this clip, I also show you a drill bit that I like to go in with after I do some shaping and some fouling. And again, let me know if you guys want a more in-depth tutorial. And if you made it this far, thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for part 2 of this video.